Hello there everybody, Jason here again. I got another video for you. It's been a little while since I did one. Last thing I was doing was top 10s. I thought I'd switch it up a bit until I get better video equipment and I start actually reviewing and showing footage of games. I have to buy a whole bunch of stuff, a microphone, a better camera, all that stuff. So I'm going to do that eventually, but until then I'll still make a few videos here. This one I'm going to cover my role-playing games, traditional role-playing games, turn-based most of them. But games that are really considered role-playing games and not just have role-playing game elements like Zelda 2 or Golden Axe Warrior, such games like that. So I'm just covering my 8 and 16-bit, which is when I was mostly into role-playing games. In fact, from probably like 1988 all the way till 96, it was the genre that I wanted to play the most. So I'm just going to cover 6 of my systems, not doing the handheld like Game Boy. I have like the Final Fantasy Legend series, but we're going to do Nintendo, which of course 8-bit, Super Nintendo, probably considered the best system to have for the role-playing games, and there's only one really on here, Grafx. I will cover the one game that I have for that. Role-playing game, that is. Then we got the Sega Master System, my very first system that I ever had. Everybody else had the Nintendo, so I went with the Sega Master System. The Sega Genesis. Not as good a role-playing game system as a Super Nintendo, but there's still some very good ones. And last but not least, the Sega CD, which has about 4 role-playing games for them, and all 4 of them are quite good. So let's start with the Sega Master System. I have Miracle Warriors. This was the game that started me on the whole role-playing game genre thing. Played it at my buddy Paul's house, and we just stayed up until I kept getting farther. And then I went home, and a few days later bought the game myself. Kind of basic these days, but this is the one that started it all for me, so I have much nostalgia for it. I love the game, regardless of what anybody thinks nowadays. And we have Phantasy Star, possibly, well, not possibly, this is the greatest 8-bit role-playing game of all time. Possibly the greatest role-playing game of all time. The thing is huge. The graphics, the music, the scope of it all, 3 planets. If you saw my top 10 Sega Master Systems, this was number 1. And then the last one for the Sega Master System is Wise the Vanished Omens. I know it's pronounced Ease, but I always used to pronounce it as Wise, so I still pronounce it as Wise. I know it's Ease. Really fun game, not traditional turn-based role-playing game, but this is still considered a role-playing game, at least in my world it is. Then let's hop over to the other 8-bit, the NES. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Pool of Radiance. Never played this, but I did play the Commodore 64 version back in the day. Liked it a lot. Once I start getting some time, I'll play this. Between my full-time job and 2 young boys and other such stuff. I don't have as much time as I did when I was a teenager in my early 20s, but I still try to find as much time as I can to play as many games as I can. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Hillsfar. There are 2 other Advanced Dungeons & Dragons games, but those are not really turn-based role-playing games. One's a shooter and the other one's a joke. Then we have the whole Dragon Warrior series. We have the original Dragon Warrior. I have Dragon Warrior 2, where you get new party members instead of just one dude. Dragon Warrior 3, the only one I've really played extensively. Played it a few years ago, got about halfway through it. We'll go back and try to pass it. And then Dragon Warrior 4, which is the last one in the series for the NES. A lot of role-playing games for the NES, actually. Then you have Dungeon Magic, Swords of the Element. I have not played it. Looks like it's a turn-based role-playing game. I hope I'm not wrong about that, but we'll play it one of these days. The original Final Fantasy, the one that started all the Final Fantasies. I played this, did not play it all the way through, but I will one of these days. Here's a kind of a unique one, Ghost Lion, also known as The Adventure of Ghost Lion. Never played it. What, is that not an 80s girl with the haircut and the whole spandex thing and everything? One of these days I'll have to give this game a try. Then we get into Highlight, which most people consider as a joke. When I play it, I'm going to find out exactly how much of a joke this game is. And then you get into more of the classic computer series, Ultima Exodus. Played this one, got very close to the end, and then kind of just lost interest. I heard the ending is horrible in that game, and that kind of turned me off because I like a good ending for a long role-playing game. Ultima, Quest of the Avatar. And the third Ultima one, Warriors of Destiny. I will get to these eventually. Right now I'm playing my Grafx 16, so when I get done with that I might start playing some of these role-playing games. They just take up so much time. Wizardry, another old computer game. And then there's the second Wizardry game, Kings of Diamonds, both kind of dungeon crawlers, but still regarded as role-playing games. Let's hop over to the Genesis. Got Buck Rogers role-playing game. Never really cared about Buck Rogers, don't know the whole story about Buck Rogers, but I do have it, and I will give it a try one of these days. Same with Dungeons & Dragons Warriors of Eternal Sun. I have not played it, but one of these days. Well, I hope I can retire from my job in about 10 years. Then I'm going to have all kinds of time to play games finally. The Fairy Tale Adventure, not your typical turn-based role-playing game, but I still consider it a role-playing game. Part of an old computer game. A lot of people probably wouldn't like this type of game. I loved it when it came out. Really fun game. Really good music, too. Might and Magic, Gates to Another World. I believe this is also Might and Magic 4 from the computer. Really fun game. I got close to the end, and then I just kind of stalled, and I still got my save file on there. One of these days I should go back and play it. Possibly, at least in my opinion, the greatest role-playing game of all time. It's kind of tough. It's like there's some other ones for like Skies of Arcadia for the Dreamcast and other such role-playing games, but this is, as far as 16-bit, this is my favorite 16-bit role-playing game of all time. It continued after the original Phantasy Star, and this was the #1 game on my top Genesis list. Then you got Phantasy Star 3, which is kind of like the black sheep of the Phantasy Star world. Kind of went off in a little different storyline. Phantasy Star does continue the storylines, unlike Final Fantasy. This one does eventually tie in with the other Phantasy Stars, but still a really good game. You have 4 different endings in that. And then the last and not least, the $90 cartridge. That's how much I paid for it when it came out brand new. Phantasy Star 4, that wraps up the whole series. A very good game. Not as good as Phantasy Star 2. Some people would say this is better, but I like Phantasy Star 2 better. And I know Highlight for the NES is a joke, but this Super Highlight for the Genesis is really a fantastic game, at least in my opinion. I'm sure a lot of people maybe not like it nowadays. It probably hasn't aged well, but back in the day, I loved it. It's got some really cool music, too, for it. And then the last one, which I saw some reviews for this game, Sword of Vermilion, and a lot of people not liking it. I love this game. One of my favorite for the Genesis, one of my favorite role-playing games, in fact. Again, not your traditional turn-based role-playing game, but still definitely considered a role-playing game in my book. Don't let what people say on the internet scare you away. I think it's a good game. Then we got to go over and get through our Super Nintendo, my Super Nintendo. I got the Breath of Fire, passed that one. That was a fun game. Then we got Earthbound, which I have in a generic case, but I do have it. Final Fantasy II, a game that I really enjoyed, played all the way through it many, many moons ago, and a really fun game. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, the beginner's role-playing game, if you will. The Illusion of Gaia. I got this brand new when it came out, and I just never really got into it. I know a lot of people really, really like this game. I'm going to have to give it another try. I just, for whatever reason, when I got it, I just could not get into it. And then we got The Secret of Evermore, which I got more than halfway through. It's a fun game. My save file's still on there. Maybe one of these days I'll go back and I'll actually pass that doggone game. And then I got my loose cartridges. We have Breath of Fire 2. Chrono Trigger, which I actually played 2 years ago for the first time, and it's all the hype that you've heard about it is true. This is my favorite Super Nintendo role-playing game. I know that it goes for a lot of money, but I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Final Fantasy III. Only got about a little past the halfway mark, and for whatever reason I lost interest in this game. But I always intended on going back and playing it, and my save file's still on there, and it's 20 years old, but boy, I'm going to try it. Lufia, The Fortress of Doom, and Lufia 2, Rise of the Sinistrals, whatever. Those I have not played yet. Secret of Mana, which I actually just started playing right before Christmas, and Christmas is my busy season, so I had to put it on hold. And I'm actually getting ready to restart it up. I only got about 2 hours into it. I think I'm just going to start it all over, but I was really enjoying what I was playing. Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars, and Wizardry 5. So those are my ones for the Super Nintendo. And just down the last few here, we have Dungeon Master 2 Skull Keep. I did like this game, but it runs mighty slow on the old Sega CD, and it kind of turned me off. I was really enjoying it, but I just couldn't stand the slow pace of it. Lunar the Silver Star, my favorite role-playing game for the Sega CD. In fact, the best game for the Sega CD, and Working Designs made some fantastic games. This game is so awesome. I actually passed it a long time ago. I want to go back and pass it. It was so much fun. And then the sequel, Lunar 2 Eternal Blue, which some people think is better than the first. I like the first better, but this one is very good nonetheless. And then the last one for the Sega CD, which is Vey, which is another Working Designs game. Another good role-playing game, not as good as the Lunar series, but seeing that there's really only 4 role-playing games for the Sega CD, if you like role-playing games, you might as well pick this one up. And last but not least, the lone one for the TurboGrafx, which is, I'll pronounce it right, Ys Book 1 and 2 for the TurboGrafx 16, which I am actually going to play. I played the Ys 1 for the Master System way back when it came out, and I liked it, so I'm going to pick up and play this one here in about a month or two. I kind of got a system on how I play all these games, so that is a lot of role-playing games for the 8 and 16-bit generation. I didn't include like the Game Boy, like I said. Just want to stick with the home consoles, and I've played at least right around half of these role-playing games and passed about a third of them. The ones that I haven't played, I'll get to them. I'll get to them eventually. I do want to try to play, or at least try, all these games eventually. But I am working on Secret of Mana for right now. So hope you liked the video. Next one I'm going to do, I might cover some of my more rare games. And man, I got a lot of rare games, so I'm going to have to pick and choose exactly which ones are not necessarily rare, or I mean worth a lot of money just because they're well sought after, but the ones that are really rare games. So that'll probably be my next video. So I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you next time.